Welcome to the Profitable Python with your host, Ben McNeil. On this episode, you will meet Andrzej Krzywda, who has been working in IT for 20 years, with the last 15 specializing in Ruby, helping huge Rails projects get back on track. Andrzej, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hello Ben. Thank you for the invitation here.
The pleasure is all mine. I think you have a lot of value to add, and we're just going to jump right into it here. So I had a question for you. What was the biggest motivation to becoming a CEO and creating Arkansas?
It's a very good question and not so easy to answer, and the answer is probably very long. But just to make it short, I really didn't plan to start a company, so I will not create this whole big plan. It wasn't like that. I was working as a developer full-time on positions in different companies. At some point, I ended up in London, where I really enjoyed working for a Python company. But then, due to some private reasons, I wanted to come back to Poland. And coming back to Poland was also combined with the idea of going freelance with Ruby, and Ruby was becoming my technology love and so on. And very quickly, my freelancing with Ruby was growing with more clients, and this meant I either had to reject clients or find some more people to help me, and I did the second thing. So I basically started hiring people or started cooperating with other freelancers, and somehow this ended us growing Arkansas. And it's only after 2 years of having up a company when I actually found a name for the company. So before that, didn't even have a name. But it was something that, in hindsight, it looks really almost like a plan. It wasn't a plan, but it looks almost like a plan. And I'm really enjoying what we are doing. We have a strong brand in the Ruby community. We specialize now in big Ruby Rails applications. So we position ourselves more on the software experts side. And we usually work with really big projects. So this is something what I was really always enjoying. So in a way, this is my DNA put into a company. We can apply some really interesting design patterns, architectures, and so on, and it makes sense for those big projects.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I was curious how, because in the pre-interview you had mentioned like your instincts, they'll speak to you, and that you should listen to them more often. And so I was kind of wondering, how have your instincts provided you guidance while building your company and kind of like going into the future with it?
Wow, that's a nice question. Some of my instincts were related to technology. So I was a Java developer at the beginning of my career. And back then, Java was the rebel thing to do. So I was really like the young person trying to change the world. And Java was meant to be the technology behind it. However, later on, I discovered Ruby, mostly through the whole initial agile movement that was happening 20 years ago. Mostly, actually more precise, the extreme programming movement. And more and more people from this area started using Ruby. So I started using Ruby, and it was kind of like by following them, but also my intuition, my heart said Ruby is really the closest I can embed the business requirements into the code. There was also this moment of time where Python was close to my heart as well. But in the end, between those two technologies, I went with Ruby mostly because of Rails, but also I slightly prefer Ruby for the syntax. Another area where my intuition played a really important role was when I started the company. I didn't really have a much choice in regards of choosing really good coworkers because they were distributed in many different places. So my intuition said it should be fine with the remote collaboration. It should be fine if we start a remote company. And this was at the beginning just an intuition. I was following DHH and the Basecamp, previously it was called 37 Signals company. They were doing really good with the remote collaboration. So I said, okay, let's try it, right? And this was a good intuition. I think remote work is now more and more mainstream. But 20 years ago, it was really like not so common.
Yeah, there's actually something that I want to dig into there real quick because at least from my experience, there's kind of these two schools of thought. And one is like, if you're not seen at work every day, then, are you doing any work, but with remote work, it's like, I see there's some argument, like if you're using Slack channels, for example, the communication
Mhm.
is is out in the public. So can you kind of talk on, like, you know, if you're doing remote work, how do you actually know if they're working, or does it matter? Is it all results based? Do you have anything to share on that?
Sure. So for me, the result of the work is always the code changes, the commits, right? So as you know, as long as someone pushes their commits frequently, everything is fine, and I can see their work. My biggest inspiration for remote work comes from open source, and open source is always result oriented, right? You don't have to declare that you will work on something. You just start working on this and then deliver the result, and that's it. So I try to apply the open source lessons into the business environment, and that's how we work with our clients. That's how we collaborate as teams internally for the RKNC needs. And I never had really bigger issues with this kind of work. So obviously, this requires self-disciplined people. This requires a lot of trust in the team. But this is what we have. This is once you work with people for a longer time, this builds naturally. And I'm really proud that that's what we have achieved. So really, I think this is often a topic to discuss for people who never tried remote work. But once you go into this and you work with people who are skilled at remote work, I consider remote work to be a skill. It's not a philosophy, it's not a religion, it's just a skill. Someone can practice that if they want. And once they practice that, they become better, and then it's easy to work with such people. So, for example, when I recruit people, I do select those people ideally who already have previous remote experience. This is the biggest obstacle usually. Do they have this? Or because if they come from the office background, they might have some longer time needed for the switch.
I don't know if the information is out there, but I've never heard of that before, where remote work is a skill. I've heard of it as like a dream job, but I've never heard of it as a skill. So yeah, thanks for sharing that with me. I don't is that also talked about in when evaluating employees at, like, around the world? Is that how people talk about remote work, or is that kind of something you've
I don't
developed?
know really. Like that's my approach to this because I don't want
Okay.
to create this. Like there are many myths around remote work, and as you said, for some people it's a dream, and I respect that. But at the same time, I really need to ensure that it's not that they want this some people just want to have easy work, and that's not what is with remote work. Remote work is still hard work. It's just you need to practice how you communicate, how you deliver the results, how you are seen, because now it's not so obvious as your first question about that was how you see people working. So it's now the responsibility of the remote coworkers to become seen all the time, or like not all the time. And there are many things people need to learn, because our main slogan at RKNC around remote work is what we call over communicate. So sometimes you need to communicate in many different ways what you're doing. Once with the commit message, once with the communicating on Slack channel that you're doing something. Maybe on the backlog you attach yourself to a certain issue. So there are many ways you can over communicate, but obviously there are ways of actually over communicating, right? Where there's just too much noise around you and still no results. So, but if you're over communicating and their results are coming frequently from your side, this is enough. There's also this myth around remote work that people don't talk to each other. And I think this is totally the opposite of what we see at RKNC. So if you see the main Slack channels, they're very much alive. And very often you will see, like, for example, there's this 4-person team and they're discussing something on Slack, usually around some specific commit. So it's always like code oriented or very specific feature oriented. And very often you will see after, 5 minutes of exchanging messages, but both the people, for example, they are working at the same time, and they will quickly jump to a Slack call or a Zoom call or something else just to have use the voice. We rarely use actually camera, so we don't feel the need of having cameras and look at each other. But obviously voice does help when both people are at the same time. So we often favor the ad hoc 2-person meetings, while we avoid the whole team meetings because they're rarely very efficient. So there are many small meetings and they're not scheduled. They are just, okay, we need this meeting, so we will do it now, right? Obviously, not always people work at the same time. In this way, I can record a short video, me on camera, or just a voice message to my coworkers saying, okay, I found this piece of code, or I found this requirement. This is the way I want to approach it. I will do it this way, in this way, and I will post the video on the Slack channel. And so people, whichever time they choose, they can watch it. And if they see some problems with my approach, or they see better ways, they can reply to me later on. So it's we distinguish between remote work and async work, and async for us is more important. So we need to be async friendly. People can work in different time zones and still collaborate efficiently.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. My mind's racing already. So there was something actually that I was curious about with distributing the work, and that maybe has something to do with the async nature of collaborating. But how you posted something on Twitter about basically chunking down the assignments to kind of something that you could execute on over the course of like a couple of days versus week-long things, and kind of the implications with that. First of all, what book was that from? And then second of all, can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so this was actually from our own book. So we wrote this book called Async Remote.
Okay.
And that was published, I don't know, like 5 years ago or 6 years ago. That was our first book that we have published. And that was kind of our manifesto. This is the way we work at Arkansas. Because we were one of the probably not so many first companies using remote approach. We thought other companies would like to learn, or other developers would like to learn. And that was great for marketing as well. And this is the book that we always give to our potential people that we want to work with. So if you are applying for a job at Arkansas, we want you to read this book. We want to be sure that it's okay with you, the practices are okay. The same applies to our customers. So when you are a lead for us, we want you to read the book, and we want you to confirm that that's the way you want to work with us. And so there is it's not very strict. It's more like a philosophy with certain rules and certain techniques. But we need to make this whole collaboration async friendly, not for the sake of being async because Arkansas is async, but also because we really believe this is a very efficient way of creating software, complex software. So we try to, whenever you explain a requirement or you have some business problem to solve, we need to analyze it. We need to split it into smaller stories in a way that any person can take it from the top of the backlog. That's our other rule. We always take the first ticket from the top of the backlog, so that we avoid the constant thinking, okay, what should I work on? We also avoid the situation where the project managers assign to certain developers, you should do this, because this leads to other problems. So we avoid like assignments. Obviously, someone decides on priorities, and because it's business driven, it should be the business in some way or another. And we also apply this technique called start from the middle. So even for very complex business requirements, we try to boil it down into the one smallest thing that really delivers the main value, even without the UI maybe, or even without some other integrations yet. But this is the first thing to do. So incrementally, later on, once you have this, we can incrementally build it up and deliver some smaller things around it. But that's the whole point, to make a big feature, split it into smaller, but start from the heart of it. So find the middle of the feature and then deliver this. So this also like the consequence of that is that we can constantly deliver software. So we try to deploy several times a day. We just if this feature is well chosen as the middle one, it should be possible to deploy that. If it's not possible, then we use feature flags. So we hide it and we only expose it to some for the QA or for the customer users. So there are like certain techniques, but it's kind of centered around this idea that one developer should be able to work on that. And we try to avoid situations where one developer is working on something for longer than, 2, 3, 4 days, right? So because this leads to other problems. If someone is assigned to a certain ticket for more than a week, it's almost always kind of a problem. People are, some people may not find it comfortable that we don't know if this person is blocked or if he or she is blocked on something. So the communication suffers usually. So we try to make those things smaller. It's a difficult thing, and again, this is a skill. This is something that you practice, and over time you become better. There is no, I don't know, once you practice this idea of finding the middle requirement, once you practice this over, I don't know, 10, 20 features, you become better at this. So, and I expect our developers everyone to be good at this, right? So because we want to avoid those special roles of project managers, product owners. They will be there, but at least they don't have to help us with every little thing, like splitting the requirements, for example.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that actually triggered another question here for you, which was, so one of the things maybe or arguably you specialize in is decomposing systems and then building business apps around those. So what are some intuitions that you've kind of discovered about doing that, decomposing a system to build a business app?
The main thing is that it's very difficult. So that's this requires experience with working with software projects, and this requires really being proactive as a developer to understand the business needs. And this is rare. So it's very difficult to find programmers who have not only this, because again, that's a skill, but it's hard to find programmers who really want to work on this skill. So really become the business developers in a way. And my mission, and that's the RKNC is kind of this way of expressing this mission and this vision, is that it's much easier and more efficient to teach a programmer the business side than it is to teach the business side how to write code. And also, I believe it's more efficient for developers to understand the business more and more than to provide some kind of layer in between the business and the programmers, usually as some kind of, I don't know, business analysts or project managers or product owners. So I try to move more and more responsibilities into like on the programmer's side. And this is very difficult. This is not for everyone, I think. The main lessons are that, for example, over the last years, I've been working on a project which involves quite a lot of knowledge around accounting and publishing. And I actually I'm saying it was like the best approach, because I did make some mistakes at the beginning, but for me, it was really important to understand the business as in what is the domain, what is really accounting about, what is publishing world about, but also the business as in how do people make money on this, right? So we are there to help someone make money. So I really need to understand very, very deeply and very, very well how the business works, so that whenever I work on a feature, I can decide, does it really help making the money, right? So I can it's usually the developers who can cut the scope in the best way. The business people, they can provide us some requirements, description, specification, and so on. But for them, it's really hard to understand which of parts of the feature is really the most difficult one. So because they don't understand the technicals, maybe they don't understand where are we with the technical depths, which parts are the expensive ones, which parts are the easy ones. So it's up to the developer to decide in the best way, only if the developer really understands the business side of it, right? So they need to understand that, okay, this is how the money is made here, this is how the provision is calculated, or whatever is the way of making money. So yeah, that's probably the explanation here.
Okay. Yeah, there's some other things that kind of cropped up when you were explaining that, because I've heard a lot of talk out there in the business world about like, you want to niche down, you want to really just drive home, like, I specialize in providing these specific services to this industry, or basically the more the better that you can niche down.
Mm-hmm.
So your niche is kind of like, we come in, we don't care what your business is, we'll come in there and decompose those processes and give you an upgrade. So I could just see like two people like playing chess. I know you're a chess fan, battling it out. Like, which way is the right way? Do you specialize, or do you go in there and just get good at the skill of decomposing any business is. Do you see where I'm going with that, I guess? Or
so let me start, and you can confirm whether that's the direction you're asking. So for example, me being developer, or I can see as a team of developers, we as you said, we try to specialize in decomposing big software or big projects or big business ideas into something that we can create the code around it or architecture for this. We work with many different business domains. So as RKNC, we don't specialize, for example, okay, we only work with e-commerce, for example, or we don't specialize in, we have quite a lot of clients from the publishing industry. So we are probably naturally good in this industry, but this is like, we don't try to position ourselves like we create software for publishing clients or for publishing industry. Instead, we position ourselves more as a technical advisors. So we are good at whatever complex software you create, especially with Ruby. Or if we can advise you to do Ruby, then we can start with that. Very often we actually take over existing projects. So that's our also probably something more unique. Yeah, I believe there are two ways of positioning yourself as a developer. You can become very, very good at specific domain, business domain, especially if you believe in this concept of developers understanding business very well. Or you can go the way we do, so we will switch between different businesses, but not that often, right? So for example, RKNC is right now 12 years as a company in the market, and it's not that we were working on hundreds of projects over this time. We were working on dozens of projects at most, because we work with our clients for many, many years. So we've had a client for 9 years. We still have a clients for 8 years. So this is the time frame. This is the time period where we can really understand the market of your client and help them and understand their domain. Sometimes even to the point that you're better at this than them, right? Because you understand it from the technical level. So you see more of the details. We sometimes are asked, how do we actually do this in our company? And this is the question to the programmers. So we try to become the very close partner to the business, to our client. And we don't specialize at this level of specific domain. We more specialize at the level of, okay, if you have a big project in Ruby, if you have a big business based on a Ruby application, or usually on a Ruby on Rails application, then probably we can help you. Especially if you are already have this project in production and we can be brought even later to this system. So it's quite rare that we are developing a software from scratch, which is a luxury, but something that we rarely have this chance, because it's just something that we are better at when we can work on something existing. And it's also the nature of the Ruby world. Ruby on Rails is a framework for rapid development of web software, and there are like many startups were based on Rails. At some point, the same developers who are able to amazingly, efficiently, quickly deliver the software to production, they're usually not the same team who can be super efficient when the business is growing, the business is making money, and at some point they will get to the wall, because suddenly the whole the Rails way, as I call it, the architecture behind most of the Ruby on Rails applications is usually not enough, and people suffer, and as developers they can't really develop it later. So this is the moment where we can jump in, and we appreciate the work that was done before, because some teams were really, really good, probably much better than us at delivering the first phase of the software, and we can try to jump in later, fix some bugs, make it perform better, structure it better. So we try to introduce some architectures or design patterns from domain-driven design. Very often we introduce event sourcing. So techniques which are not very popular in the Ruby world, but we find them working very well for the bigger applications.
Yeah, there's definitely a gold mine going on here. I can't wait to go back through this, and thanks for sharing all this. There's just really thought-provoking stuff. I guess the only other question I have, I wasn't planning on going down this path, but since we're here, we're going there, I guess. But I was kind of curious, like, if you're starting off, for example, does it make sense to take that approach, or do you think that they should should they specialize in something and then branch out? Or if they do go your approach, which is like, we handle all business domains, what is your, like, how do you convince a client that you're capable? Like, hey, I just did a publishing project, but now I'm going to go out and do something with marketing, or like, how do you convince the customer that, you know, you're the right choice?
Usually I don't try to convince them that
Okay.
much. Uh, so we have our, like, the way our marketing works. So RKC marketing works is that we try to specialize in those big Ruby applications, and we often get clients who are either already from a recommendation by someone, or they follow us, our blog, or maybe my Twitter, or they already kind of know our approach. So it's more like they apply to work with us. So I try to make this as a, not a, I don't want to position in a way that I'm trying to convince them. We should try to convince each other, right? It should be like a win-win situation that we want to work together. So for example, when I'm asked to write, I don't remember the official name, like the request for proposal, right? That's the formal name for writing proposals. So I usually don't do that, for example. So it's the clients that they are coming to us, and they, there is a certain culture behind our work, and you either click with us or you don't, and you can feel it. So if it's clear that you need some convincing, then I'm not trying to convince that strong, because maybe I will be good at this sales process and I will convert you as a lead. But sooner or later, it will be apparent that maybe we are not a good fit together, right? So, so if it, obviously, if it feels like we can be a good fit, and it does deserve some, I don't know, convincing or some more conversations to understand each other, because my intuition says that it should be fine, then I will try to do this, but only to a certain point, right? So it's usually enough if they try to read our book Async Remote, and that's usually enough. And if they come from the Ruby world, we have this, because that's the thing, that with the if you take Ruby on Rails, is such a specific niche in the overall programming market, that if you have an existing project written in Ruby on Rails, you can't take just some JavaScript developers start working on that. This requires a deeper knowledge of how Rails works, and we have this knowledge, right? So we have this foundation. While we may not be as good as whatever is your business domain yet, right? So we will try to see if this is the domain that we can learn quickly or not. So, but usually I think in practice it was okay for us to learn something along the way, and I don't think like the whole idea that some developers will be excellent at this specific business domain is so unique anyway, that even if we are good at publishing but we never worked, let's say, on, I don't know, blockchain projects, but we have strong mathematics skills, computer science skills, that we can learn that. I think what I'm trying to get to is that the idea of developers understanding business is so rare that even if we don't have specific business knowledge, we can learn that because we have learned other domains. While no, this is not a very popular approach, I would say. Usually you try to build a layer on top of developers. That layer of people understand business, while the developers, there's this, I think it's a misconception overall that they can translate business to developers, and the developers, they become just some translators, I don't want to use bad names here, but it's some idea that developers, they don't need to think that much, right? This is a very popular approach nowadays, and it's hard to argue with that, but this is not the way I want to work.
Yeah, I think what I'm loving so much about this is like, maybe there's definitely some hard work involved to get to this point, but basically, like, you don't have to have domain expertise to go get a client in a certain domain. And that's like a really, like, that should be an awesome concept for everybody listening to this. Like, that's really freedom right there. I mean, you just have to have confidence in yourself, it sounds like, to be able to solve these problems, and maybe some technical, like, fundamental stuff. Is that That's kind of what I'm like, the computer science and the mathematical skills.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good like description of how we work. And we, if you look at our blog, for example, so we in the end we obviously work with business people, we work with businesses, but the way we attract those businesses is not via some content where we say 10 ways how you should market your product, or
Right.
20 ways of starting your business, or whatever. We only target technical people, and through this we get the clients. So the whole of our marketing is via other developers, senior developers, CTOs who are usually former developers, and I believe they can trust us because they see the technical content, not the marketing behind it. And this makes it, I think the RKNC approach to marketing is very specific because we don't have to target different groups of people. We only target programmers, and sometimes we target some programmers that we can recruit later. Sometimes we target programmers who can buy our books. Sometimes we target programmers who might be our clients, or they are CTOs at our potential clients. So via the same blog post, we can target like everyone who we are interested in. So that's like our attitude to marketing. And we don't really have marketing people. We don't have salespeople. I'm probably the only person who does. Actually, many of us at RKNC do those marketing roles, sales roles sometimes. And I'm the only person who you can call a manager or someone else than a developer, but I'm still also a developer, right? It's just I'm a mix of roles right now. So we don't have, at RKNC, we don't really have that many people apart from programmers.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. I'm gonna move on just so I can cover some other content, but this is really fascinating to me. Like this is how you're able to actually have such a lean team, and everybody's becoming just domain experts along the way. I mean, it's really kind of really fascinating, I think.
Yeah, so just maybe to end this chapter of this conversation. So this is one of the book I'm reading right now, and it's really good. And it's not our book. It's called Developer Hegemony, but the Future of Labor by Eric Dietrich. And that book was recommended to me by some people over and over. And I started reading this, and it's also a good summary how our philosophy works. And also our own book, Async Remote, like kind of describes the way developers can be stronger as developers, but also as business people and so on. And I came up, I probably stolen it from someone, but I use this term, like there is business to customers, so B2C, there is business to business, so B2B. I use the term business to developers, so B2D. And that's what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, you sound like you're part ninja or something like that, because literally it's like you don't do any marketing, and you're almost vetting every opportunity that comes to you. And so I'm just kind of curious. Well, I'll say I want to know how you vet your opportunities and how you kill ideas. And I had that later in my questioning, but maybe we just jump into it right now. How do you vet, or how do you determine if an opportunity is worth going for, or do you? Yeah, let's start there, and then we'll talk about how do you kill your ideas.
So I'm a person who has too many ideas, so I constantly have to kill ideas. Sometimes it's just for me the team is the most important partner. So we use Slack, we communicate. I think we have good relationship between each other. So whenever I have an idea or we have some potential client coming to us, it's almost like a whole company decision. And definitely when we recruit new people, it's a whole company decision in a way, because it also doesn't happen very often. There is only between 13 to 15 developers usually at one moment at RKNC, so it's a small company. It's not that often that we recruit new people. It's not that often that people quit our company. It's not that often that we get new clients, because we are booked right now, fully booked. Usually the clients who we work with, they want more of us than less of us. So this means that it's not really a common situation where we get a new client. So usually when I have a potential client, even if they sound really, really well, it's a nice opportunity for us, even maybe a better financial opportunity, I prefer one decision process is that we are very, I'm not sure if that's a good English word, loyal to our old clients. So we prefer to stay with clients who we trust already and who we have good relationship with, instead of jumping to someone else because they will pay us better, right? So obviously we value money, but in the end it's the relationship that matters and the trust that we built over years. So the current clients are more important than new clients, which means I have to kill lots of ideas all the time, unfortunately. But there is this area of, because I'm a developer by heart, right? So I started a company, but I'm still a developer. I write maybe less code than I used to, but I still write code. But the area where I can try new ideas is probably marketing and sales, especially in those areas where we say we can sell our knowledge. So we publish ebooks. We have started an online class last year. It's called Rails Architect Masterclass. We target senior Ruby developers with our educational approaches. Next month we will have Rails Architect Conference, so we'll host an actual event in Poland for 3 days. So this is the area where I can try new ideas and experiment with them, and this is the part of the company that we want to grow. So we want to educate more and more. So what we learn at client projects, we can somehow think about how to structure it, how to put it in a well-structured way for other people to learn from, and then we try to do this. So this is our approach to at least productize a part of the company, but still the client projects are the most important part.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I love that so much. So basically relationship over money. If the decision is kind of come down to it, that's your kind of high level decision process. Yeah, that's really cool. So does your team work much with integrating like machine learning models into your projects, or is that not really been a requirement of clients?
I know this topic is growing, and I think I understand the basics of it, but it's not an area that we have been involved, and we've been only on one project where some machine learning people were involved in a project, and there were some Python people, and the way they were involved was just, okay, they need access to our database, and that was basically it. And I don't remember the details, but I'm not sure how exactly this worked in the end. But it's not an area that we are very, it's not something that we work with directly.
It's almost like two completely different ecosystems, I guess. Maybe they see each other from time to time.
Yeah. I think we are like in the software engineering area more than we are in the data science area or the machine learning. So I'm personally very interested in how it will develop the whole AI, machine learning and stuff, as a chess player especially. But looking at this from the business perspective and from my developer's heart perspective, like I myself don't really see this as a big passion for myself. I value this. I think there is a big value in that, but it's just something, okay, probably there are better people working on this.
Yeah, fair enough. What differentiates a junior developer versus somebody that's on your team?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, but a good question. We often discuss this at our company. First of all, we try to avoid those labels overall. There were times where probably the easiest way to find appliance of this label junior developer is trying to say how many years of experience you have, and trying to decide where you are in the experience timeline. But even there, I've been working with some very young people who just from the beginning you see them like seniors who just don't know they are already seniors, right? Because they have such a deep passion to the programming part, for understanding all the layers. So I don't really use the word junior that much. However, I am involved in certain projects or ideas where I see this as a problem, that some people can't enter the programming market because nowadays it's really so many people apply. There is no place for everyone. Some people get stuck and they lose hope along the way that maybe they will not get there. So I'm trying to help some of the younger people, maybe even pre-junior, like even the junior maybe have, I don't know, 1 year experience. Some people have 0 years of experience while they already have some skills. So this is an interesting discussion, but I would like detach it from our company, because at our company we are not dealing with those less experienced people that much. It's a very difficult, like maybe even most difficult problem right now in our software community overall, like how to get those less experienced people to bring more value, because there's a huge need for senior people and there is not enough people for that, while there is a huge amount of the pre-junior and junior people, and I think the market doesn't really need that much of them. So the whole problem comes down how we can quickly make them more seniorish, whatever that means. And this is a big challenge, and this requires probably some concepts of internships and mentorships, some programs, maybe boot camps, people who educate as much as they can on social media and so on. Very, very difficult topic, and I would love to discuss it more, but it just requires more precise areas. Okay, how we can make someone to start a job in the Ruby market, maybe, right? So that's something we can focus on. In general, this is like, because that's also what I believe in. I don't agree with that, but the whole concept that there's not one programming community, but there are many different programming communities. So there's the Python web community, there's the Python machine learning community, there's Ruby. So Ruby is actually unified. Ruby is almost only Rails, and Rails is only web. So when you enter Ruby, you are a web developer. So this is like, okay, in this community, I feel very confident I can help someone get there. And this is what I do actually. But I don't know how to jump into, I don't know, Java development or Python development or something like that. And this is different discussion because, for example, in Rails, you can easily learn Rails very quickly. You can become a very strong junior in Rails, deliver very big amount of value for the business, for the team, and you can quickly start delivering value with Rails. So visible value for the client. In those communities where you don't have such efficient frameworks like Rails or such easy frameworks, this is harder, because then you have to spend more time on learning the foundations, the basics, just to get to the point where you are somehow, I don't know, let's put it this way, profitable for whoever works with you, right? So I believe in Rails, in the Rails community, this is quite healthy, and there is shorter path to deliver value.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Do you see there's some sort of attributes of the person where maybe they're more capable of becoming senior than others, or do you think it's all within them all? They just need to put in the time?
It requires a lot of patience anyway. So patience and systematic work. One of my recent projects that I am involved in is called Find Open Source Mentor, because I believe without good mentors, such a person who just starts in the program with the programming or is a junior, I believe that every junior needs to be surrounded by some mentors, or at least one mentor. And this is probably the biggest challenge for our industry, that us more on the senior side, we need to understand that we need to be mentors in some way or another, because like you can be a direct mentor with some people, or you can host a podcast like you're doing, right? So you are opening the door for many people. And I really appreciate the work of you, for example, like you're doing with the podcast, because I believe this is really very, very important, very often not appreciated enough. Like the work many people do on social media, on YouTube, on podcasts, this delivers huge value for the younger people, for the junior people. But But then also, okay, you can, because with such podcasts, you can highlight certain areas, certain problems, and those junior people, they can at least, see, okay, this is something I've heard here for the first time. Maybe I can educate. So they will need to have a checklist of things, a to-do list. Okay, I need to at least understand. Okay, so they were like, if I'm listening to a podcast and I'm a junior developer and I don't understand a certain area, my to-do point will be, okay, educate myself at least enough to understand this part of the conversation, right? So understand the terminology that was used. This is the first step. Second step is, okay, whatever they are talking about, does it make sense? Can I contribute to this discussion, right? So this is the place where Twitter helps, or listening to podcasts help, because such a new person or junior person can be exposed to many different new topics, and they can see whether it's worth doing. But in the end, it's really, really helpful to find a good mentor who can work directly with you. And it doesn't have to be, very... the mentor doesn't need to spend much time. Sometimes it's just, pointing direction. And one mentor can easily help 10 juniors. I'm probably surrounded right now by 20 people who I'm trying to help, but it's not a big deal overall. They are just asking me, okay, Andrzej, I wrote this piece of code. Can you show me what are my biggest problems right now? And I see this code. Okay, they used some non-idiomatic Ruby constructions, right? So I can point them. Okay, you need to read that book, and that's the whole work I do. So I don't teach them what the content of the book. I just say, this is a really good book, you should read it because at this moment this will help you. Some people are good at Ruby skills, for example, but I clearly see they lack the business understanding of the software, right? So they try to put the software almost like at the center, where it's not. We are helping, software is just a tool for businesses. And if a developer, even a junior developer, doesn't understand how business works, and in my area of the world, so Eastern Europe, this is very common. We are not often exposed to the market economy for generations. There were historically problems with that in our countries. So people think that sales and marketing and business is something bad, and that's a mental change they have to follow in the end, right? So that's so then I have to point them, okay, you need to educate yourself a little bit with the business part of it, because even if you're really good at Ruby or Rails, you will have problems talking to the business people, right? And understand that.
Yeah, that's what's really fascinating about you, I think, or at least for me, what I think is so fascinating about you is, so you've got this whole technical piece covered, but then you've kind of you're the CEO, you're the captain of the ship there. That's kind of like a lot to take on. And I'm just curious if there was like one or two big takeaways after going through that process. I mean, what would you say to somebody else out there that's basically like a freelancer, they're a master of the code, but they're struggling getting clients, or they have like an entrepreneurial venture that they want to create, but that's not their forte? Like, what kind of, I guess, mentorship could you provide to them in a couple of sentences on how to acquire these skills, or maybe don't do it? I don't know. What is the answer there?
It's difficult, but let me try. So when I started the company, as I said, I wasn't really aware that I'm starting a company. I was just, freelancing and trying to get some help because I was struggling with the situation. But my instinct was always like the very, very basic and primitive instinct. Like, the whole business thing was for me, am I making positive cash flow, right? That was the only thing, because I had to survive. So I had to pay the rent. I had to pay for certain stuff in my life. And when I was starting the company, it wasn't it wasn't so obvious as it is now that developers are making really big amounts of money. They can make big amounts of money. Like 15 years ago, it wasn't so obvious yet. The market rates were not that high as they are now. So it wasn't so obvious that I will actually make enough money to survive. It wasn't clear. So at the beginning, for me, a whole understanding of my economy and the business side was, I need to make money. I need to make more money than they spend. And it's only later that I started recognizing that, for example, there is such an area which is called sales. And this is no, this and this and this, and there is this area of marketing, there is the branding part, there is content marketing, and it was usually I found those labels only after I've been using them. So I've been using content marketing for years without knowing it's called content marketing. So I think it's good to, like, my approach would be to understand what I instinctively, oh my god, that's a good hard word, instinctively do anyway, and only then educate myself enough from the theoretical part of the business, how this is called by the business people. So I've never used the term lead for many years before knowing that, okay, so the clients that I just talked to them about potentially working together, those are leads. I just never knew this term, and we actually don't even have that really good word for that in the Polish language. So this was really interesting for me, like learning, okay, so those customers, potential customers, are after, like, there's a special phase for that. It's called leads, or it's called, I don't know, nurturing leads or converting the leads. Like, I didn't really have this vocabulary, and it was like via decomposing it later into smaller parts that I learned, okay, this is what it is. And I followed some people, like, for example, I was a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk from the beginning, and I learned quite a lot from just following Gary. And not everyone loves Gary, but there was certain areas of Gary's message that I really liked, especially around content marketing, that I was applying into practice. So this is the kind of mentor. So obviously, everyone needs to find the mentor they like, they enjoy, and try to, I don't know, follow your instinct, follow what your mentor says, and maybe like this is a very difficult journey. So coming from a developer and try to become a CEO, there are certain phases, and I'm not sure if it's very easy to say, okay, those are the specific phases, because for everyone there are probably different phases. But that's an area that I found myself to be very interested. So I'm already helping, and I'm a mentor for people who are switching to the business side more and more. And I've helped some people recently to, for example, switch from being the developer to create online classes, right? And that was something that I never thought I could be a mentor for that, but apparently I was able to help someone. And and I think more and more developers are trying to do this switch, or at least partially. But I'm still not in a position to say, okay, I'm an expert at this, and it's just one of the many areas that I enjoy doing, but probably it's not my main area of interest. For me, the crucial points were understanding the different phases of business, or the different phases of making money. So, okay, sales, branding, marketing, and so on. And I'm still not really that efficient in using those terms.
Yeah, it's a journey or a process, like you were saying. What are some major learnings from building software using the DDD approach?
DDD helps us applying the business thinking into the code base. And this was something that we started doing, I don't know, 8 years ago in our projects, where we started to recognize that there is this biggest challenge in software. How do you decompose things? What are the modules, right? It's easy to say, split the code into modules, but what are the modules? How are they named? This is the difficult part. And it seems that the answer is that the business has all the answers. So that the domain we are working with has all the answers. So if I'm working with publishing and I work on a software that helps calculating royalties, there is this part about accounting there. There is invoicing. There are names in the business side of those things, and those names, they apply one-to-one to a module. And in the domain-driven design, in the strategic tools around domain-driven design, those are called contexts. So bounded context, an area of business that you just model with your code. So you try to imagine a model in your head or in the whiteboard of how to model this part of the business using programming terms, and then you need to map this model one-to-one into code. So, okay, it's nice to design, nice to draw some boxes, but now let's make it happen in the code. And because I believe in the incremental work on software, I'm coming from the extreme programming background where things are never perfect, but you just make them incrementally better. So I think that's what Arkansas does. We kind of know where we are going in terms of the bigger vision. We know where we are right now, and we know that the work needs to be done in small steps, while the systems still need to be functional all the time. It needs to work, even if it's just a huge, mess at the beginning of the process. But we need to be very, very careful with our changes. And so we apply those domain-driven design strategic changes, like splitting the context. So that's one part. So, okay, you extract the accounting, you extract the invoicing, you extract the billing part, you extract the payments part. Those are the contexts. And once you have those, at least the boundaries are there somehow, you can apply the other, they called building blocks of domain-driven design. For example, I'm fascinated by the pattern called process manager. So this area of your code where you need to, there are those long business processes in the business world. So before you send money to an author in the publishing industry, there's a lot of things that needs to happen. So some books needs to be written, they need to be published, they need to be sold, they need to be wait for the books to be returned. There's a specific times for that. And only later you can actually issue a statement and a payment to the author. So there's a long business process. And those kind of long business processes in DDD, they are called process managers. So that you have a design pattern for that, where you say, only when this, and this happen, we can issue a payment. So it's like almost very clearly input, output. So we connect domain-driven design with event-driven architecture. So the input comes as events, right? Okay, so book was written, contract was signed, something else was delivered. We have the address, or we have the account number, or the bank account number of the author. Everything is like happened. Okay, now we can issue a new command. So a command to the payment context, we can send money to this author. And this building block is like at the heart of many of the software projects. And our work is very often find the process manager, because it's usually there, but it's usually implemented as a bunch of scattered if statements somewhere there, right? So there's a bit here, a bit here, a bit here. Once we gradually introduce some event-driven architecture, so we rely on the concept of events, we use the building blocks from domain-driven design as, for example, the process manager. And this is usually the middle. So when I told you about this start from the middle approach, like this process manager of this publishing industry, for example, this is the heart of the software. Like everything else, the UI, obviously it's important, but it's a detail. It's a periphery of the system. It's easy to implement. There is nothing unknown. But once you get this middle stuff done in an elegant way, it will be much easier for you to build other parts of the system. So process managers and bounded context, the two of my favorite tools from domain-driven design.
Where do people, is there like an excellent resource that you would recommend if they wanted to get more in touch with how DDD works, or?
The biggest title is called Domain-Driven Design. It's a classic book by Eric Evans. It was published in 2004 or 5. It's called Blue Book because it has a blue cover. So that's the classic one. And I think many programmers will fall in love very quickly once they start reading it, because it's expressing like all the problems in software design, and it provides solutions. And the second book is called Implementing Domain-Driven Design. It's written by Yvonne Vernon, and it shows more code and more like specific code transformations that you can make. And there is a good example how to build a project management software using this kind of building blocks. If you are doing, for example, the Rails projects, we also wrote a book called Domain-Driven Rails, where we explain how to do domain-driven design in Rails. I know some people from a company where I used to work for So the Python company, they're working on something very similar, but for the Python community. So I know that domain-driven design is slowly becoming a thing in the Python community as well.
Okay.
So probably I think there is a repo. I will send you a link later where
Sure.
there are some resources.
Yeah, that's thanks for sharing all that. I just reflect on my own place of work, and because execution is emphasized over, well, like planning is good, but execution is better. Just like, and actually that was a question. I don't know how much we're kind of already up on our hour here, but I was just kind of curious, like when it comes to planning versus execution, it sounds like you're very execution heavy, but there's also some discovery involved to kick it off. How do you weigh those?
Like we try to split our developers work into at any time a developer, like me included, it should be clear what is the feature I'm working on. So where in the backlog I'm assigned to. So my analysis, my work on the code should be always in the context of something that I'm currently assigned on because that's needed from the business perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are talking about, the analysis versus planning at the project level, then it's becoming always specific. It's like context bound to what I'm currently working for the business. But obviously very often you work on a small feature, but you have some insights about the bigger problems in the project. So you try to, I believe in that the value is not in documenting everything somewhere because people will forget about reading this and so on, but just constant communication. This is what I believe in. So let's say if I constantly see that some problems keep appearing around a specific theme, and there are some tools to attack this problem, then we should be like constantly coming back to this and somehow but obviously there is a limit to how much you can talk about it. Once we have some idea of probably what can solve our problem, maybe it's extracting a new process manager, for example, then let someone just do it. Like instead of talking, it's better to prepare a pull request, show your attempt to implement this, and then we can discuss. So yes, it's very quickly we can, at Arkansas we say that, show me the code. You can talk a lot about abstract patterns and design decisions and DDD and stuff and other buzzwords, but in the end it's the code, and show me the code is the best way to say, okay, we need to be concrete now, like let's go and see at this, look at this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's usually a good idea to express in the code, because suddenly you think it's a big deal. We're talking about some huge things like bigger new process managers, new bounded context. In the end, it's just extracting a new module, 5 lines, new files created, 5 new classes are created, some unit tests are created. Suddenly it's a thing to be done in 3 hours, right? And that was the whole discussion around it. So it's very often much easier to just express it in the code.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I kind of had some wind down questions. How are we doing on time for you?
I'm okay with, I have time.
Okay, yeah, I have a few. You can choose to answer these however deeply you want. But the first one was, so where do you see your business in 5 years? We can kick it off with that.
That's a hard one. So I'm not a huge planner in terms of such a long-term situation. I think we will be similar in the area that we'll still be working on Ruby projects, Rails projects. I see the Ruby perspective to be very bright overall. So I don't think this area of technology will change that much, but obviously we work on web development. So the part where things change very quickly is the front-end part. So we're also efficient at JavaScript, at React and stuff. Mm-hmm. So this is the area where it's hard to predict what will be there in 5 years. We'll probably change frameworks 3 times meanwhile. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to business, I believe we will be stronger in our educational approaches. So we'll probably have more online classes. I think the online classes is becoming the big thing right now. So all the video classes, we've published already 8 or 9 ebooks and 1 physical, actual paper book.
Mhm.
That was very good format for us for many years. It's still good, but right now it's clear that the trend is to publish online classes. We have the biggest one right now. It's our 12-week Rails Architect Masterclass.
Mhm.
We combine it with the actual real life workshops, usually around the area of domain-driven design with Rails. I think it will be, I think and maybe hope that nothing revolutionary will change our business directions, right? So
Mhm.
this is what I think we want to do, but we will just be better. Maybe we'll find better ways of teaching this stuff. Maybe we'll find better ways of helping our clients to work with such patterns. I'm overall a futurist, but I don't think in 5 years that many things will change overall, right? So we're already 12 years on the market as a company, and once we learned about domain-driven design and stuff, I don't think it will, that many things changed over those last 5 years, for example, right?
Mhm.
It's just we'll try to, because I want RKNC to be a small company in terms of the number of people. So we are small by design, while I want our influence to be growing. So I want our voice to be louder for those people who want to hear us, because the Ruby
Mhm.
community is also divided. Like some people just work on very small applications, and following our recommendations in terms of domain-driven design just doesn't make sense for them, and I would actually discourage them from following us too much. Yeah, but we will be focusing on those big applications, and this is where we want our voice to be heard.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So you had mentioned, I was in the pre-interview, I was doing a bunch of research, and somewhere I captured this. You were talking about learning deeply. Oh, actually, it's how you would have started over from scratch. You would have learned Rails deeply. Uh, how do you learn deeply? Like, what is the methodology that you use? Is it read, take notes, or how do you learn deeply?
I think there's like time for everything. So there's time for just reading. There is time for applying the knowledge which is acquired. I try to, when I mentor some new people, I try to help them by saying, try to create this side project and focus on the project where you get stuck. For example, you don't know how to solve the authentication problem. Okay, I can point you to a nice authentication library. So then you can take a few days and just learn about this library and try to include it. So I think in the Rails community, there are certain, like the focus is very much on efficiency and like on the time for delivery. I think it's a very specific community where it's really all about getting the result as quickly as possible. Sometimes it's too strong. Sometimes you need to learn more fundamental things instead of just delivering. So sometimes it's too much. But overall, I like this attitude in our community where in the end it's the software that is working matters, and not the reading time and so on. But nothing replaces a big fundamental knowledge of computer science stuff, right? So I do expect many people to, in the end, they need to find time to read how compilers work, how the low-level stuff works, how to I don't know, compile the Linux kernel even, right? It's not something that you need to do nowadays. This is the way I grew up, by compiling the Linux kernel, but I think it's important to at some point find the time and understand this and try this, right? So that you will build the knowledge. So it's nice that we have the frameworks like Django in Python or Ruby on Rails in Ruby, where you can get the results quickly. And we should acquire this skill as the first one, because this will, I don't know, create value for other people, which means we can make money on this. For example, we can survive.
Mhm.
But then we need to structure our learning time in order to understand like everything that happens below. So we need to understand how CQL works, what's happening with this TCP/IP protocol, right? You need to, at some point, you just need to find it, find time and learn it. And it may take years, so it's not a short process, right? It's a very long process for each of us.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, uh, what do you look for when hiring people on your team, like attributes of the people?
Um, there are several areas. So like the full stack approach. So people need to understand that when they are working with our clients, they will be the person responsible for delivering a feature both on the backend side and the frontend side. And also they need to be able to communicate with the client, they need to be able to understand the business. So those are the areas that I try to recognize very quickly. Very often the recruitment process is actually easier for us because someone who we recruit is actually recommended by someone already at Arkansas. So when someone from Arkansas recommends someone else, it's much easier to say, okay, they probably already know what they are doing by recommending them.
Mm.
Uh, very often the people who apply they're applying because they are following us on our blog, they read our books, they attend our workshops or conferences, and they understand the philosophy. So quite a lot of the recruitment process work is easier because they're already very familiar with our process, and it's easier because we are very public about how we work. So many people know already. Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, usually it's by recognizing the character skills, like, okay, is this person self-disciplined, how reliable they can be, and so on. But this is the area where it's very hard to say at the beginning. It's something that you will it's sometimes easier to detect maybe after you start the cooperation. So I'm not trying to prove everything before we start working together. Sometimes it's just easier to, okay, let's do the work together and then we'll see. And I believe that's the way you can see in the open source world. So I'm always inspired by what open source projects are doing.
Mm-hmm.
When I have an open source project and someone tries to help me, I don't need to recruit them because they will just take a task. Maybe I can help them with some more precise specification, but they will try to solve the problem, and I will just see how they are solving the problem, and this way we can work together. So
Hmm.
I believe the open source influence will be bigger and bigger on the software world. Also, not only by the libraries that are produced, by the whole philosophy behind it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's thanks for sharing that. What is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
I think in terms of like the scope of programming, I was very influenced by extreme programming, so by Kent Beck and people like that. And when I worked at that Python company that I mentioned, I worked with my boss was a programmer, and his attitude was like really almost like life changing for me as a programmer, because
Mm-hmm.
his attitude was really a lot about let's keep it simple, let's try not to predict things in the future. This is the requirement we have right now, and even though on the backlog we can see the next requirements, let's not think about them. Let's do the minimal thing that we need to do in order to finish this requirement, this requirement we have right now. So let's not over engineer stuff, let's make the scope not bigger than it should be. And this was, at the same time, it was very like simple and obvious, but when I saw this in practice while pair programming with Giles, it was something that, oh my god, this really works, and we are so efficient, we're so fast. So over one day we delivered 2 new features. It was all like test driven. It was all code reviewed because of pair programming all the time. So it was like amazing to see exactly how it works. So I was already, after reading the theory from extreme programming books, but then working with actually experienced people from the extreme programming community. So like my boss, for example, that was eye-opening, that okay, this actually works. And that's something that I think I'm still under influence, that you just always think about the next step, And even though it does sound smart to think about the future, you don't have to, right? You will always find a way to solve the next problems as long as you keep your code simple.
Cool. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. What is the best non-technical book that you've read?
Non-technical book. There were so many of them, like I should probably look at my bookshelf. Yeah, there was this time where I was following Gary Vaynerchuk, and his book Crushing It, for example, was important for me. I think I needed to be taught how to be more confident, more aggressive in marketing and sales, in my vision of how marketing and sales can work. So I think learning from Gary Vaynerchuk overall and reading his books was really useful for me, especially with the confidence part. I was very introverted as a developer. I was not that socially skilled as a person. And somehow I was trying to improve this area of my life, of business as well. So understanding how business works for me was also helping me in my life overall.
Yeah. That's cool. Oh, okay. So basically those Gary Vaynerchuk books, the Crushing It and okay, cool. What are the top programming languages that should be on people's radars going into 2020?
Yeah, that's the hard question. I know this is the fancy title for many videos on YouTube and so on. I think right now the trends are clear. So JavaScript is winning, at least from my perspective, right? JavaScript seems to be winning the market. Python is really strong and growing, and it's hard to make a mistake going into Python right now. I say this with a really hard feeling, because there was a long time where Ruby and Python were competing very closely to each other, because they are such similar languages that there's almost no differences between them. But now it's clear that in terms of the market share, Python has won this competition with Ruby. But I would advise many people not to think in terms of market share that much, where JavaScript and Python are bigger and bigger, but find niches. And when you look at niches, it might be sometimes surprising to see that it's not Python or JavaScript that are winning, right? So for example, I believe that in terms of the web development, Ruby and Python are either equivalent choices, or that Ruby might be even better, because Ruby is only about web, while Python is about web and lots of other things. Everything that is in Ruby happened because of web development. So you will have a library for everything web related. And if you want your future to be somehow web related, and I believe web is still the future, then Ruby is I think a good choice among also other languages. So I find it surprising, because it wasn't my bet for a long time, but Rust seems to be in a really growing position. It's not my favorite syntax overall, but certain of the design solutions at the language level, at the runtime level, are really strong from foundations. So while, for example, Python and Ruby, they did struggle because of the global interpreter lock, so the GIL problem for many years, and it's only now that they are trying to find some good solutions for that. There are languages like Rust, which has this problem solved from the beginning. But still, I think there is big future for the JVM-based languages, including Java. Obviously, we should never underestimate Microsoft, so C# will probably be strong. We should not underestimate what Apple is doing, so probably Swift is still going to be strong. It's something like there is no point to just choosing the leader right now. It's just know which direction you really want to go, where you feel your passion for software development. And I don't really believe that there is like that a software developer, I don't want to be limited to web, but this is the kind of project that I work on for the last 15 years. So I should probably accept the reality that I'm closer to web than anything else. But I would be fine if if I had to switch to Python, for example. I'm not planning to do this, but I would be fine with that.
Sure. Cool. Well, I kind of buzzed through a few things there at the end, so I just want to make sure, did we talk about everything that you would like to talk about? Did we leave anything off the table this go around?
I feel we've covered so many areas. It was really good to have this opportunity. So I feel we're good.
Cool. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And with that, I'll just shut down the podcast. But if you want to stick around for maybe a couple minutes after, we could just kind of wind down. But other than that, thank you so much for being on the show, and I wish you the best of luck. It sounds like you have a lot of really awesome things going on with your business.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who listened to this. Thank you for your attention, for your patience, and feel free to contact me whichever way. Probably Twitter is fastest. So
okay, that was my I always ask that at the end too, and I basically forgot, but I need to do this. So what is the main call to action here that you have? That you have a course. If you're kind of like an advanced Ruby person, you can check that out. You're all on the major socials, which we'll make sure and link in the show. What is your call to action here at the end of the show?
So if you liked what I was saying about certain areas, I probably have some more interesting thoughts around like remote work. So if you're into remote collaboration, you can follow me on Twitter about that, or read our blog post. We have the blog.arkansas.com, where we have the sections for Ruby, for remote work, for JavaScript, I think. So you can choose your one. If you happen to be a Ruby developer, there's probably quite a lot you can get from following me, because I often tweet about or blog about Ruby. Yeah, so the call to action is mostly, I know, because probably your community is mostly Python specific. So I just want to say that, I feel that Python and Ruby are very similar. It's very good to look at each other. So I actually, even though I'm not doing Python, and nowadays, nothing about Python, I do follow Python blogs, because the same solution for problems you find in the Python community will work for the Ruby community. And I find that it's very rare that we look at each other, right? So if you're a Python developer, look at Ruby community, probably, for example, by following me, because you will see similar problems, right? And some of the problems were solved in Ruby were still, for example, I see that domain-driven design is more popular on Ruby than it is in Python community. So maybe that's something you can at least try to see. Maybe it's a good fit for Python. Maybe you will find some, like the Ruby code examples are almost identical to whatever would be with Python. So if you're interested in those architectural things like domain-driven design, CQRS, and even sourcing, you can follow me on the Twitter and read our Arkansas blog, because the code will be identical to whatever you want to do with Python, for example.
Cool.
And if you happen to be a Ruby developer, then consider, the Rails Architect Masterclass is our way of teaching what I was just said. So domain-driven design within the Rails context, and the Rails Architect Conference, which is happening this year in November in Wrocław, Poland. This is another way of coming and discussing it together, and then as part of this, you will get access to Rails Architect Masterclass, which is an online class. So it's a whole combo of knowledge.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure and everybody has access to those links as well. So with that being said, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Yep.